Hi, I'm Fatal Ford, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to play the newest character in Ravenswatch, the wizardly magician himself, Merlin. Merlin's trait, Celestial Potency, does a couple of things for him. First, when activated, it will grant him a very brief window of intangibility, meaning it's an effective panic button to dodge a heavy-hitting attack. And then it'll also surround Merlin with the maximum amount of 3 runes of potency. This is one of Merlin's core mechanics, as the runes will empower the next ability used. For any given ability, you can tell which parts of the spell will be empowered by the blue text. So, for giant brambles, for example, the damage will be increased from a base of 50 to 200, as shown here. And for Frost Orb, the time and damage will be increased from 6 seconds and 30 damage to 12 seconds and 60 damage, respectively, at level 1. A key thing to notice about his trait is that it has a 30-second cooldown, where each of his spell categories only has an 8-second cooldown. This means that how you choose to use the runes of potency will be a key part of your gameplay loop. Maybe you're playing Merlin as a healer and a crowd control character, so you'll save your runes for sacred spells. Or if you're playing him for damage, perhaps you'll save your runes for the heavier hitting nature and arcane spells. Next up, let's talk about Merlin's attacks. He's got a 3-hit combo at his disposal, with the 3rd hit being the one that matters most. First off, it does about double the damage of the 1st and 2nd individual hits, but more importantly, the 3rd hit summons a single rune of potency for Merlin, so long as it hits an enemy. So you can see right away why this is so important. I mentioned that his trait has a 30-second cooldown, but farming your attack will allow Merlin to build runes and empower spells while you wait for your trait to come back up. Alright. Next, let's get into the meat of Merlin's kit, his spells. Before we get into the individual abilities, I want to quickly cover how his casting and cooldowns actually work. Merlin has 3 classes of spells, those being Nature, Arcane, and Sacred, listed in that order. Merlin's kit basically works as what I call a dial-a spell, meaning that any individual spell will take at least 2 button presses. So you'll press one button, either power, special, or defense, to open the class of spell, and then you'll select one of the 3 spells available within that class. Unlike other characters though, each spell does not have its own cooldown, but rather the entire class shares one cooldown. In other words, you could use the power ability in your nature class, and then immediately open the arcane spells, use its power ability, and then open your sacred spells and use your power there as well. To simplify his kit, Pastek graciously gave each class a standard 8-second cooldown. And speaking of cooldown, if you pick up any additional charges of spells from items like a Thunderstone, which gives you 2 additional charges of your special, that will actually apply to the class of spell. So in this case, a Thunderstone would allow you to use any arcane spell 2 additional times, meaning you could fireball 3 times in a row, or cast any variation of arcane spells back to back to back. Also, a final quick note on his kit: if you open one class of spells and you want to back out, you can press the contextual action button. This is the same button you use to interact with doors and chests, or to pick up items, so you're not locked into a spell class just because you open it. Okay, let's finally take a look at his classes of spells and the individual spells themselves. We'll start up with the nature spells tied to Merlin's power button. This class of spells generally just do straight damage, with none of them applying any sort of status to enemies. To open this class of spells, you'll need to first press power and then select a spell with power, special, or defense. I'll stop repeating this info, just know that when I mention spells in 3s, I'm talking about them in this order. His power nature spell is Giant Brambles, which deals damage in a cone in front of Merlin. This spell offers a quick slap of damage. It's not one of Merlin's very highest damaging spells, but it does offer you a quick burst without sacrificing much mobility. This is a great tool for finishing weak enemies or even one-shotting smaller enemies. Empowering Giant Brambles will raise its damage. Merlin's special nature spell is Starfall, which summons down stars from the sky to fall on 3 enemies and deal flat damage. The base damage is just a little higher here than on giant brambles, and you can cast this spell without stopping at all, but you can't aim it. This, I think, is a great spell to use when you're surrounded, or to use from a little further away, as it has a pretty wide range. Keep in mind, even though the spell auto-targets enemies, it will allow you to cast it even if no enemies are actually in range. Also, each enemy can only be hit once, so even though you can summon a base of 3 stars, you can't hit single enemies multiple times. You could also use this spell to farm experience off of enemies that you're walking by between camps, as an empowered Starfall can often one-shot small enemies. Empowering Starfall will raise the base damage of each star and raise the number of stars by the number of runes consumed, meaning a maximum Starfall will summon 6 stars. The final nature spell under defense is Stone Shield, which allows Merlin to block any incoming damage, dealing a little bit of damage per second in return, and then exploding for a pop of damage. This is a great counterpunch tool when you don't want to leave the fight. If you see a big hit coming, you can simply turn this on and basically become invincible for about 2 seconds. Keep in mind though, you're not intangible, so although you'll deflect any normal damage, you can still be grabbed by certain boss enemies. Empowering Stone Shield will raise the damage per second, as well as the pop of damage at the end of the spell. Next up are Merlin's arcane spells, his most devastating class of abilities, tied to the special button. These typically deal the most damage and inflict status effects on enemies. First up is Fork of Lightning, the arcane power. This is Merlin's single most powerful spell. It does a huge amount of damage per second, and it can last up to 3 seconds long. For the duration of the spell, Merlin is stuck in place, and it has a small cast time before the spell actually comes out, meaning you'll need to be very thoughtful of how you use this one. You'll deal a huge burst of damage in a mostly straight line, but you'll be stuck in place for nearly 4 seconds as you use it. This is great to use at the outskirts of a fight, or when enemies are stunned, almost like a mini ultimate ability. Empowering Fork of Lightning will raise its damage per second. Next up is Fireball, Merlin's arcane special. Like Fork of Lightning, this is a powerful spell that trades off mobility, although not to the same extent. You'll stand still briefly as Merlin summons the Fireball, which will shoot in a straight line. It'll generate an AoE burst of damage once it hits an enemy, or at the end of the spell's range. Fireball obviously inflicts Ignite on enemies, and it also does more damage the further it travels, meaning that spacing is crucial when casting this spell. Fireball is great to cast from the edge of the fight and to set several enemies on fire. If you're running with allies that are building for Ignite, this may be preferable to use over Fork of Lightning in many situations. Empowering Fireball will increase its damage and increase its damage as it travels over space, meaning that spacing becomes even more important to get all of that bonus damage when you empower it. Merlin's last arcane spell is Frost Orb, the arcane defense. This spell will send out a ball of ice that moves around on its own, seeking enemies for a pretty long while, dealing a little damage every other second and applying chilled to all enemies hit. This is great if you're running Merlin as a support character and not worried about dealing a huge amount of damage yourself, as the chilled status will slow all enemies it touches. The orb lasts so long that it could easily chill every enemy in a fight, and this is especially useful if you're teamed up with other characters building around the chill mechanic. Empowering this ability will raise its damage and, more importantly, increase its duration by 2 seconds for each rune of potency consumed, up to a base of 12 seconds. Last up are Merlin's sacred spells, tied to his defense button. None of these spells deal any base damage, but instead offer crowd control, healing, and defense. The Sacred Power ability is Blessing, which grants regeneration to the most heavily wounded nearby hero. This could be Merlin himself or any one ally. This is a great tool to save your teammates or yourself, and between fights, you should be spamming this on cooldown. There's basically no reason to not use it if you're not currently in a fight, and this ability turns Merlin into a health battery for the team. Empowering the ability raises the amount of regeneration per second. Just keep in mind, this doesn't do a huge burst of healing, but rather applies healing over time, so it's best used before you and your friends are missing too much health. The sacred special is Light Nova, which deals a huge amount of stagger, often stunning enemies outright, in a small AoE around Merlin. If it strikes any enemy, it also grants a small shield to Merlin and any nearby allies for 6 seconds. This is a great engagement tool, and you should probably be casting it at the start of every fight and on cooldown during fights, as long as your allies aren't missing too much health. This will help you stun and lock down bigger enemies much faster, and keep in mind, stun enemies take bonus damage, which means you'll clear fights faster as well. Empowering Light Nova will improve the amount of stagger you deal and the shields provided to your team. Merlin's final spell is his Sacred Defense, Blink. This is Merlin's get out of jail free card, offering intangibility and allowing him to cross a short distance. This doesn't offer any sort of utility or damage in its base form, but if you find yourself surrounded and in danger, it's a great way to quickly reposition in the fight. There's no empowerment for Blink, so it only has its one base form. This also means that you can use Blink without spending runes, making it a unique spell amongst his arsenal. Before I close out the video, let's talk really quickly about his level 1 ultimate and the general flow of combat for Merlin. Before I close out the video, let's talk really quickly about his level 1 ultimate and the general flow of combat for Merlin. His ultimate allows him to summon a standing stone out of the ground, which will draw in nearby enemies and after a short time, explode for a burst of damage. So here's how a fight could look. Cast your ultimate at the start of the fight to draw the attention of some of the biggest enemies. Then take advantage of their distraction to cast Light Nova and hopefully stun some enemies. Next, retreat to the edge of the fight and start casting spells. If you feel safe, cast your biggest, slowest arcane spells like Fork of Lightning and Fireball. And if you don't feel safe, cast your quick nature spells like Giant Brambles or Starfall. If you get into trouble, use Blink and Stone Shield to reposition, and cast Blessing if you or your teammates start to lose health. Rinse and repeat. Okay, that's going to wrap up this introductory video for Merlin. I'm not going to get into builds or more advanced strategies with this character, as I want to be able to quickly produce this video upon Merlin's launch and keep it as short as possible. If anyone is interested in seeing a more advanced guide discussing broader strategies on how to win with Merlin, or how to put together the wizard's builds, let me know in the comments and I may follow up with an advanced guide. And on a final note, if you made it here to the end of the video, remember to hit the like button so it can be recommended to more people, and subscribe for more essays and guides in the future. Thanks, and have a beautiful day.